Mount Etna just blew open, and what came out is not lava. Bright, glowing stuff poured from the crater that geologists say they've never seen before. It's not basalt, it's not andesite. Lab tests came back empty-handed, a composition that shouldn't exist on the surface. At the same time, a pyroclastic flow slammed down the flank at 140 kilometers per hour, burning ground that was already dead. This is not a normal eruption. Scientists are calling the blast a paroxysm, a violent, rare burst that hints the mountain is changing from the inside. Even more chilling, Etna's internal shape now looks like it did 7,200 years ago, right before a massive flank collapse that caused a huge Mediterranean tsunami. Something deep beneath Etna is different. Is this a quiet warning, or the first sign of a disaster we can't stop? Ash clung to every surface as the first field teams pushed toward Etna's southeast crater, boots sinking into ground still hot from the pyroclastic surge. The air pulsed with static and the bitter tang of sulfur. A thermal camera, mounted to a battered tripod, caught the last clear image before its lens clouded and electronics failed. A sudden burst of heat, then darkness. Above, a drone traced the edge of the glowing flow, its rotors fighting turbulence, relaying a few seconds of jagged footage before vanishing into the plume. That fragment, just 12 seconds, became the only surviving record of the main channel's advance. On the approach, every step was a gamble. The ground cracked underfoot, fissures venting steam with a force that rattled helmets and cameras. Radio chatter snapped between the lead volcanologist and the observatory. Visibility dropping, thermal spike. Are you seeing this? Each member of the crew had a role: sampling kit, backup batteries, satellite phone, yet the plan dissolved as the terrain shifted. A technician slipped, catching himself on glassy rock still warm enough to blister through gloves. Sensors beeped, warning of unstable readings. No one spoke of turning back. The team pressed forward, eyes fixed on the luminous path ahead. The surface shimmered, not the dull red of cooling lava, but something brighter, almost electric, reflecting off the swirling ash. Every device strained to capture the anomaly. Handheld spectrometers, GoPros strapped to helmets, even a borrowed smartphone held at arm's length. As the wind shifted, a wave of heat forced the group to retreat, but not before a sample vial snapped shut, sealing in a fragment of the unknown material. Back at the perimeter, the crew compared what little footage survived. The drone's final frames showed the glowing flow splitting, then swallowing the camera in a white flash. No one knew if the sample would make it through analysis, but in that moment, the risk felt necessary. The mountain had changed, and so had the rules for those who studied it. Inside the mobile lab, the technician peeled off heat-warped gloves, knuckles raw and trembling. The sample vial, still warm to the touch, pulsed with a faint ultraviolet glow. Instruments lined the bench: spectrometers, Geiger counters, a battered thermal probe. Readings flickered, then froze. The fluorescence under ultraviolet was immediate, intense, unlike anything cataloged from Etna's past. The gamma sensor, designed for baseline radiation, snapped to its maximum range and stayed there, warning lights stuttering. In the logbook, the technician scrawled a note: gamma spike, off scale, retest with backup. A second probe, freshly calibrated, produced the same result. Next came the melting test. The fragment, smaller than a coin, refused to liquefy even as the induction furnace climbed past 1,600 degrees Celsius. The technician checked the reference table. No volcanic glass, no known silicate should have survived that heat. The sample's surface only shimmered, reflecting blue-white arcs under the lab's lamps. Chain of custody protocol demanded a witness, but the backup analyst was still outside, troubleshooting a failed data uplink. Alone, the technician sealed the vial, labeled it with a trembling hand, and flagged the entry. Unknown phase, confirm with Catania. Back at the perimeter, radio static carried snatches of debate. Some argued for immediate transfer to the main INGV lab, while others questioned the readings. Was it instrument error, contamination, or something deeper? The technician's voice, hoarse from ash, cut through. "I've never seen numbers like this. Not here. Not anywhere." As dusk fell, the sample case was locked, tagged, and handed off to the waiting van bound for Catania. The first data, already uploaded, triggered a cascade of encrypted messages between field teams and analysts across Europe. The mystery had only deepened. Was this a fleeting artifact, or the first sign that Etna's inner workings had changed in ways no one could yet explain? Rising above the Sicilian plain, Mount Etna has always been a paradox, predictable in its restlessness, yet woven into the daily rhythm of life below. Its slopes are etched with the memory of centuries, vineyards clinging to blackened soil, villages rebuilt more times than anyone can count, and a skyline forever shaped by the mountain's moods. On most days, Etna's activity is a steady pulse. Minor tremors ripple through the ground, too subtle for most to feel, but always present in the long-term datasets tracked by seismic analysts at the Osservatorio Etneo. Their screens flicker with colored graphs, each spike and lull a familiar signature. Paroxysms, those sudden, violent bursts, are cataloged and compared, their intervals plotted against decades of records. The southeast crater, especially, has become a focus for these studies. Its pattern of eruptions so regular that local airspace managers keep a standing protocol. When the plume rises, Catania's airport closes, flights rerouted in a choreography honed by repetition. Yet, routine never means safe. In 396 BC, as Roman chroniclers tell it, Etna's fire blocked the advance of a Carthaginian army, the molten flow halting soldiers in their tracks. Generations later, the same ground supports olive groves and family homes, the threat of eruption balanced against the promise of fertile land. Farmers plant by the mountain's calendar, trusting that its gifts will outweigh its dangers. Children in Zaffarana Etnea grow up learning evacuation routes as part of their school lessons, and every family has a story of lost harvests, of ash-darkened mornings, of nights when the sky glowed red. For scientists, Etna's rhythm has become a baseline. Each eruption is logged, its chemistry analyzed, its seismicity mapped. The mountain's typical products, basaltic lava, sulfurous gases, glassy scoria, are as familiar as the instruments used to measure them. Analysts like Dr. Lucia Ferraro pore over years of data, tracing the slow migration of vents, the subtle inflation of the summit, the ebb and flow of volcanic gases. Patterns emerge and fade, but always within the boundaries set by decades of observation. Even the most dramatic events, towering plumes, roaring fountains, the rare pyroclastic surge, fit within the expected range, their risks calculated, their impacts managed. That sense of order, of knowing where the limits lie, is what gives the mountain its uneasy peace. When the routine is broken, when the numbers stop making sense and the familiar patterns fracture, the stakes shift in ways that ripple far beyond the crater's edge. The sample arrived at the INGV laboratory in Catania under double lock, its chain of custody tag signed by 3 hands. Within hours, the first results sent a ripple through the network of European partner labs. X-ray diffraction, the gold standard for mineral identification, returned a pattern that matched nothing in the International Center for Diffraction data. Peaks appeared where no known silicate, oxide, or glass should register. The analyst, Dr. Sofia Bernardi, reviewed the calibration, then ran the scan again. Same result: unmatched signatures, a fingerprint from nowhere. She flagged the anomaly and uploaded the raw data to the central server, triggering an urgent peer alert. In Berlin, the geochemistry team at GFZ received their split of the sample. Inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, designed to detect parts per billion, pinged on trace elements at levels far above the norm: yttrium, cerium, and a spike in lanthanides, usually reserved for deep mantle xenoliths. The lead chemist, Dr. Felix Kruger, checked for contamination, then for instrument drift. When the numbers held, he called for a halt and a blind retest. Meanwhile, the Paris lab reported a third contradiction. Raman spectroscopy found ambiguous lattice structures, some reminiscent of high-pressure phases, others simply noise. The French team questioned whether the sample had been altered in transit, or if it was a composite, a mixture of volcanic glass and something else. Emails flew between labs, each thread more urgent than the last. Was this a new mineral, a reaction product from extreme heat and pressure, or a fluke? The Catania lab pointed to the XRD, no match in terrestrial database. Berlin countered with their trace element chart, levels incompatible with surface magmas. Paris pressed for a peer review before any public statement. The debate spilled into late-night video calls, with analysts scrutinizing spectra pixel by pixel, arguing over baselines and background subtraction. Some invoked contamination, others a flaw in the chain of custody, but none could square the data with ordinary volcanic science. By the end of the week, the sample had become a scientific riddle. Calls for an open review grew louder. The INGV Technical Bulletin, issued March 20th, stated only, "Preliminary analysis yields no match in current terrestrial igneous reference sets." The raw data was posted to a secure server, inviting scrutiny from outside experts. If the numbers held, the implications would reach far beyond Etna. If not, trust in the process itself would come under fire. The mystery deepened, and with it, the stakes for everyone watching the mountain's next move. In Zaffarana Etnea, the Russo family faced a decision that split them down the middle. By noon, civil defense advisories had reached every house on their street, some calling for immediate evacuation, others insisting the risk was contained. The parents packed essentials and left for Catania, bringing the youngest and the grandparents, haunted by old stories of nights when the mountain's breath turned deadly. Their eldest daughter, Julia, refused to go. She stood on the balcony, watching the ash drift sideways, certain that Etna's anger would fade as it always had. To her, leaving meant surrendering to fear, a fear she'd grown up learning to manage, not escape. Down the slope in Milo, the Conti family argued over the radio. Civil defense bulletins contradicted each other by the hour. One neighbor had already driven her goats 10 kilometers downslope, setting up a makeshift pen in a friend's orchard. The Contis stayed, unwilling to abandon their vineyard and the year's first shoots. For them, risk was part of the harvest. Still, the tension was new. At the town meeting, voices clashed, some demanding buses, others protesting any talk of evacuation. "Etna is life and fear at once," an older man muttered. "We watch, we listen, but we never know which day it takes from us." The confusion grew as news spread that 2 foreign companies had filed requests for mineral exploration permits, citing the economic promise of the mountain's strange new deposits. Some saw opportunity, others a threat. Rumors raced through the villages, of scientists who couldn't explain what they'd found, of officials who downplayed the danger, of coverage gaps in the warning systems that left certain hamlets in limbo. For every family that left, another stayed behind, weighing loyalty to the land against the uncertainty of what might come next. Civil defense officials, caught between scientific caution and local pressure, struggled to issue clear guidance. Internal memos revealed a tug-of-war. We cannot afford another mass evacuation unless we have unequivocal proof of impending flank failure. Yet the proof, if it existed, was buried in conflicting data and missing signals. The sense of control that once anchored these communities had slipped away, replaced by a quiet dread. Every choice now felt like a gamble, every hour a test of faith in the mountain, in science, and in each other. Inside the control room at the Osservatorio Etneo, the night's final report landed with a thud. Satellite feeds from the European Space Agency's Sentinel network had been running constant passes before, during, and after the eruption. But not every dataset made it to the public dashboards. In the hours leading up to the blast, confidential synthetic aperture radar interferograms showed a pattern few had witnessed outside simulation. Asymmetric inflation, concentrated along the southeast sector, exceeding the threshold set after the 2002 collapse scare. Civil defense analysts, reviewing the raw displacement maps, found peak values that doubled the warning line, signals that, by protocol, should have triggered a full-scale evacuation order. The tension in the room sharpened as the next file opened. Infrasound records registered a low-frequency surge, a kind of acoustic warning that usually precedes major structural failure. The model's risk index, recalculated with the new numbers, leapt to its highest mark since the system went live. Yet, the advisory that left the building was cautious. Heightened vigilance, no immediate action. The decision was recorded, time-stamped, and archived. A second round of data arrived from the European Space Agency's Atmospheric Division. High-resolution thermal imaging revealed a persistent hot zone, not just at the vent, but tracing a line beneath the southeast flank, mirroring the deformation seen in the synthetic aperture radar. Analysts cross-checked the overlays, searching for error, but the alignment held. The risk of sector collapse, an event capable of sending millions of tons of rock toward the sea, was now more than theoretical. Inside a locked server room, a final memo circulated among senior staff. Thresholds exceeded. Synthetic aperture radar asymmetry persistent. Recommend immediate review of evacuation protocols. The document was flagged for restricted distribution. Outside, civil defense vehicles idled in the dark, waiting for orders that never came. The public, still divided between caution and routine, received no warning beyond the usual advisories. Scientists kept their screens open to the live data, watching for the next spike. The mountain's secrets, for now, remained locked in encrypted files and guarded conversations. All anyone could do was wait for the next sign, knowing that the line between vigilance and catastrophe had never felt thinner. If you want to follow every development as it happens, subscribe now. The story of Etna isn't finished, and the next alert may come without warning. In June 2025, Mount Etna released a glowing material that has never matched any known volcanic substance, as confirmed by 3 independent European laboratories. Field teams recorded UV fluorescence and a gamma spike at the eruption site, measurements that remain unmatched in Etna's documented history. Historical records show the volcano's internal structure now echoes conditions last seen 7,200 years ago, before a catastrophic collapse and Mediterranean tsunami. Despite urgent analysis, the substance's exact composition and the source of its properties are still undetermined. Confidential data from satellite radar and local sensors exceeded safety thresholds, prompting authorities to recommend heightened monitoring and, in some cases, evacuation. As of today, much of the laboratory data and key satellite imagery remain classified, leaving scientists and communities with more questions than answers. What is clear? Etna's behavior has shifted in ways that challenge what we know about volcanic risk. For the latest verified updates on this ongoing story, subscribe and follow our archive.